You thought the Star Wars reviews were over? Well, guess what?
We're not done yet.
Hey everybody, I'm Joe, and I'm here today to finally talk about the long-anticipated Star Wars The Last Jedi, written and directed by Rian Johnson, starring everybody. There's no need to go through all the names. There's a whole lot of Star Wars people in here, so that's all you need to know. And if you guys haven't been following my series of reviews, I've reviewed every single movie in the original Star Wars trilogy leading up to The Last Jedi. I've already done videos on The Force Awakens, but hopefully I'll do an in-depth analysis one day. After it's been out since the 15th of December, I feel like enough people have seen it by now for me to go into detail about the film. So if you didn't get that hint, I'm gonna go into spoilers. I warned you. Get out of here. You got about 5 seconds. Alright, let's talk about it. Oh, by the way, check out this stopwatch I got for Christmas. How about that, huh? Captain Phasma in all her glory. Oh, yeah. So The Last Jedi has now finally been released, and I've seen this movie twice. I saw it the night before it was officially released in the United States, and then I saw it again the other night, because I wanted to digest it and to maybe get a better look at it after getting over the initial excitement of seeing it and all. And I can definitely say that I think this is a really, really good movie, but not a perfect one, and I'll get into that as I go along. So if you've seen The Force Awakens, you know that that movie ended on a cliffhanger, with Rey handing out the lightsaber to Luke, and the audience was left to wonder, what's he going to do with that lightsaber? What's he going to say? And the movie answers that question in a way that I did not expect, and it actually had me laughing a little bit, as well as the audience when I first saw this, and even the second time when I saw it. He looks down on it, he looks up at Rey, she's waiting for an answer. All of a sudden, he tosses it over his shoulder and storms off, much to Rey's astonishment. One of those first things that you could tell that this is definitely not Luke Skywalker that we first met in A New Hope. And as I'm sure most of you probably know by now, but Mark Hamill has publicly said that he was kind of surprised by the direction that they took with Luke, and that he actually disagreed with a lot of the choices that they made. And I can see why, but on the other hand, I think it's a perfect fit for this character, especially after everything that happened with Kylo Ren and the New Jedi Order and all that stuff. So it's not really surprising, but at the same time, it kind of is. But what I did like is that even though he's more jaded and more curmudgeon-y, as some people have described, similar to Yoda in Empire Strikes Back being initially hesitant to train Luke in the ways of the Jedi, you can definitely tell that Luke Skywalker's still there. He still has some slivers of hope left underneath him, and there's a part of him that does want to help Rey, but after everything that happened with Kylo Ren, he basically is like, I can't go through that again. I was really excited to see Mark Hamill's return as Luke, and I was really curious to see how he was going to be after so long. And I have to say, this might be the best that Mark Hamill has ever been. Every single scene with him was awesome. It was perfect. And as many predicted, he does train Rey in certain ways of the Force, but Rey actually doesn't need that much training. I mean, she's already pretty self-sufficient from her time on Jakku, but yeah, she definitely needs to learn some things about the Force, and Luke does teach her that, such as reaching out with her feelings and feeling the Force surround her and all the life that surrounds it. And it actually leads to a really funny scene when he says reach out, but she reaches out with her hand, and Luke's reaction is just perfect, like, really? So he grabs a blade of grass, goes, do you feel something? Do you feel something? No! That is not the Force! Reach out with your feelings. Oh, God. But it's on the scenes in the island with Luke that Rey actually starts to have visions of talking to Kylo Ren, but in a way where it's like, wait a minute. Are they in each other's environments? Are they talking to each other? Are they transporting each other through the Force plane? Because that's another thing that this movie really surprised me with, is how they show new Force abilities that have never been touched upon before in the movies. Maybe in the books they've been brought up or mentioned, but this I thought was really cool, because in a way they can sort of go through each other's environments and they can talk to each other as if they're actually there. And at one point, Rey is on the island standing in the rain. Kylo Ren is somewhere on his cruiser or something, and after he's done talking to her, he wipes his face and he looks down on his glove, and you could see rainwater on his glove, so it's like, whoa. So was he actually there? It was kind of jarring at first, like, wait a minute, how is this happening here? But it's later addressed that Supreme Leader Snoke bridged their minds together in order to manipulate the two to bring him to them and see who the worthy successor would be, Kylo Ren or Rey. And Kylo Ren continues to be probably the most compelling villain that I've ever seen in recent memory. And Adam Driver is absolutely fantastic as Kylo Ren. He is so enthralling and so compelling with his performance because he's still conflicted over whether or not he wants to be a dark side Force user or on the light side of the Force. After killing his father, Supreme Leader Snoke can tell that he's still conflicted inside, and at one point he says, "You are nothing. You are worthless." In fact, Snoke says to Rey when Kylo Ren brings her to him, "I knew he wasn't strong enough to bring you here himself, so I bridged your minds together to manipulate him." In fact, in an earlier scene when Kylo goes to meet with Snoke, he has his helmet on. At one point he says, "Take that ridiculous thing off." He takes it off and you can see the scar on his face, and there's this despondent look in his eyes. You can tell that he's still conflicted about what he should be doing. And at one point when he's in the elevator, he smashes his helmet to pieces and just leaves it there. It's just showing his face like, look, I am who I am. I'm not Darth Vader. And I remember seeing that in the trailer and thinking, wait a minute, why is he destroying his mask? I saw this comment on, I think it was on YouTube, I'm not really sure, but in a way it kind of reminded me of the movie Creed with Adonis Creed in one specific way. Adonis knows that he's not going to be his father Apollo, but he has to acknowledge that he is part of Apollo Creed. He is his son. Once he acknowledges it, he can use that but also make it his own legacy. Kylo Ren, I can see sort of doing a similar thing in this one. He'll never be Darth Vader, but once he acknowledges that he is the descendant of Vader, he can use that and make his own legacy. And him smashing his helmet against the elevator wall is just that first step in becoming his own person. And I can't remember if I mentioned it in my Force Awakens review about 2 years back, but Adam Driver, for some reason, I've always felt this, even watching Force Awakens when he takes his mask off, he just oozes evil. It's almost like he's dripping with the dark side, and that's a huge credit to Adam Driver, because people have complained that Kylo Ren's just a big wuss and he's kind of pathetic. Congratulations. That's the whole point of his character. He knows he's a wimp, and he knows that he's not going to be like Darth Vader, and he's got his own twisted, warped way of how powerful he should be. And he's still, at this point, as far as I can tell, not fully trained as a dark side Force user, so probably in Episode 9 he'll be on the master level of the ways of the Jedi, as far as the dark side is concerned. And we also get to learn a little bit about the backstory with Luke and Kylo Ren. And Luke had a moment whether or not he should kill Kylo. But then it led to a serious confrontation. And then it talks about how the Jedi Order was destroyed and Luke was just so broken up over it that he decided no more Jedi ways. It's all gotta go. And as people have said, this movie finally has the courage to question the Jedi way. Because it's been established in the prequel trilogy, such as one of the posters for Attack of the Clones. A Jedi shall not know anger, nor hatred, nor love. And you don't need to hear me say it, but it's been implied, and in fact, I think maybe in some ways it's actually been stated, if you actually feel any kind of warm, loving emotions, you're heading for the dark side. What? That's stupid. In fact, in one scene, when Luke and Rey are talking, he talks about how, at the height of the Jedi's power, it led to the rise of Darth Sidious, the Emperor, and Darth Vader, the most evil man in the galaxy. And I'm sure that Star Wars fans have been wondering, how come nobody has brought this up yet? And thankfully, this movie actually has the courage to do so. And since Luke started off wanting to know about the ways of the Force, learning it from Obi-Wan and Yoda, and then trying to continue on that legacy, but then having the same thing happen to him through Kylo Ren, I definitely buy that he would finally put his foot down and say, you know what? Maybe this whole Jedi thing should go away for good because we suck. Maybe this isn't worth saving anymore. The Force should not belong to the Jedi because it's too dangerous. But in a similar fashion that Luke tried to do with Yoda, Rey responds by saying, no, you saw that there was conflict in Vader, and you showed him that there was still good in him after all, and that led to the rise of the Jedi Order again. And then I became a legend. Luke Skywalker, Jedi Master. It's one of those never meet your heroes kind of things. The way he acts around Rey, it actually is like, oh. Because your heroes are just people. Even though there's a lot of actors and actresses out there that I really like, in a lot of ways I'm actually kind of scared to meet them because I'm afraid that they might tell me to take a hike or something. So it's nothing new, but in this one, I think it's done very effectively. Now, since I mentioned the similarities between Luke and Rey with Luke and Yoda, yes, there are similarities to previous Star Wars films, but really, if people want stuff like that to be completely gone from the Star Wars movies, that is actually kind of unfair because franchises do that in general. The only difference is, how do you go about it? That's the question, and of course that's entirely down to subjectivity. But honestly, since people complained about The Force Awakens being too similar to A New Hope, this definitely has some throwbacks to The Empire Strikes Back, and actually has a couple of nods to Return of the Jedi, such as Snoke showing Rey the destruction of the Resistance fleet. Look at the fleet being lost. Your friends will die for sure. Similar to the Emperor showing Luke the destruction of the Rebel fleet. Your fleet is lost, and your friends on the Endor moon will not survive. Not to mention, as Rey is being taken by Kylo to Supreme Leader Snoke, she pleads with him, trying to get him to see the error of his ways, similar to Luke telling Vader to do the same thing. I feel the conflict within you. Let go of your hate, Father. The throwbacks are still there, but it's done in a way that services the story. Maybe a little too often, The Force Awakens used a little bit too much of familiarity, but still, I think it was needed at the time in order to get people back into the Star Wars franchise because it had been such a long time. There's going to be similarities to previous films anyway in Star Wars because that's how franchises work. If you don't want any of that stuff, well, do yourselves a favor. Don't watch the movies anymore. My God. Sorry about that. I'm got a little axe to grind with some Star Wars fans, but as you'd expect, they are very toxic. Not all of them, but a lot of them anyway. Now let's talk about Rey. Daisy Ridley continues to prove herself as a very worthy actress and a worthy choice for the character. She does go through some training by learning the ways of the Force, feeling the Force around her, but since she's already pretty self-sufficient, she doesn't really need that much training, and I think the writers knew that in order to avoid going down too much similar routes, but at the same time, she definitely needs to learn some things about the Force, and I like seeing that dynamic between her and Luke, saying, "Resist it, Rey. Resist it. Reach out. What do you see? The light. The dark. The balance." In fact, in a similar fashion that Luke does with the hallucination with Darth Vader, she goes down into the black hole that she sees on the island, and she sees that mirror vision of herself where you see multiple versions of yourself in the mirror like a reflection, and at one point she goes to this edge of the wall and asks to see her parents, and some silhouettes show up, but then it fades and you see her reflection again. And in some ways I can't really help but feel that's a foreshadowing of her heritage, which I'll talk about in a little bit. But when she goes to confront Kylo Ren and Supreme Leader Snoke, Snoke tortures her, demanding to find out where Luke Skywalker is. She refuses to budge. Kylo is told to kill her. It looks like he's about to with his lightsaber, but Luke's lightsaber is right next to Snoke, and secretly, using the Force, Kylo Ren kills Snoke, slices him in half, and Kylo and Rey use the lightsabers to fight off the Imperial guards. That scene was off the chain. And Chris Stuckman pointed out that it was a samurai-inspired type of imagery. Given that Rian Johnson is an anime fan, I'm not really that surprised, but in a way, I can kind of see the Eastern spiritual traditions in the Jedi ways. Very much inspired by pantheism, and maybe a little bit of Christianity, but at least it's how I see it. That's a whole different story. But it's very much inspired by Eastern traditions, like samurai. There's a level of respect that each opponent feels when they face off against each other in a lightsaber fight, particularly the ones between Luke and Vader. Then after the guards are killed, Kylo tries to get Rey to join him in the fight. After a couple words, he says, "Stop hanging on to the past. You still want to know who your parents are, do you? Or have you known all along? Go ahead, say it." And when I first saw this, I was leaning really closely to say, "Okay, who's your parents? Who is it? Who are they?" But then she says, "They were nobody. Yeah, a bunch of drunkards who sold you for money. You came from nothing. You come from nothing. You are nothing. You're a nobody. But not to me." And I'll admit, the first time I saw this, I thought, what? No, 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 no! But then as the movie went on, I actually dwelled on it, and I actually said to my mom, wait a minute. How do we know that Kylo Ren wasn't lying to her about that? I don't buy that. In fact, there was a guy a couple of feet away from me who heard what I said, and he said, "Yeah, I feel the same way too." People think that this movie actually puts to bed all those theories about Snoke, about Rey's parents, and all that stuff, and people are actually taking it as the absolute truth. And apparently Rian Johnson has said that what Kylo Ren is true. But also when he was asked, is Episode 9 going to stay true to that? He said, it's not up to me anymore. JJ's gonna decide. Look, I could be completely wrong about this, but me personally, I'm not buying it as the truth. I think she's somebody important. You've probably heard me say this before. You can go back and watch some of my other videos, but I definitely have a feeling that she is the descendant of Luke Skywalker, whether it's his daughter or his niece. I think more than likely she is his daughter. Of course, that comes a question, well, if he's her father, then who's the mother? And that's a good question, but think about this for a minute. With the flashbacks with Kylo Ren, which I actually really like the flashbacks because we haven't really seen that in Star Wars until this point. Seeing Luke having a moment where he thought about maybe striking down Kylo Ren because the darkness was growing too strong inside of him, but then he realized, wait a minute. What am I doing? This is ridiculous. But Kylo gives a different story to Rey during one of the Force connection conversations that they have. That Luke was just so ready to strike him down in cold blood. You remember what Obi-Wan said to Luke about Anakin? So what I told you was true. From a certain point of view. You can't expect me to believe that Kylo Ren would be that truthful about what he said. Now, maybe she is a nobody, but if you ask me, If that's the case, what was the point of all that mystery set up in The Force Awakens? When she says to BB-8, where do you come from? Classified, really. Me too. Big secret. Okay. Something's there. And then there's these little looks that Han Solo has after a while when she fixes the compressor. When he asks her, what's your name? Rey. Rey. And then he has another look when she says, I didn't know there was this much green in the whole galaxy. It's a look of sadness and guilt in a way. And also when he sees her climbing out of the wall in Starkiller Base, the camera focuses in on Han Solo and he has like a proud look on his face for some reason. And then, probably the biggest indicator for me is Maz Kanata. And she's only in this movie for one scene, which I kind of was disappointed in because I wanted to see more of her personally. But after they're talking at the table and Rey leaves to find Finn, Maz asks Han, who's the girl? And it cuts. And the next time you see Maz Kanata, Rey has discovered the lightsaber and has had that vision of being left on Jakku saying, come back, come back. And she says,
that lightsaber was Luke's and his father's before him, and now it calls to you.
If she really was nobody special, then why did that lightsaber call out to her like that? You can argue that, well, it calls out to random Force users and because of the crystals and everything. That sounds like an expanded universe explanation. Expanded universe does not count anymore. Not most of it anyway. But if it did call out to random Force users, that lightsaber would have been gone a long time ago. And also to bring it back to The Last Jedi, there's a couple moments that I didn't notice until rewatch. As it's established in the movie, Luke has cut himself off from the Force, which is why he didn't sense Han's death through his sister Leia. But at one point, after Leia is in the hospital bed, he's able to make a Force connection with her. While she's sleeping, she says, Luke. And Luke shakes a little bit and goes, Leia. And then it cuts to Rey going down into the black hole. And the next thing we see is Luke looking for Rey, and he says to her once he finds her, get out of here. Get out. And he says to Yoda's Force Ghost, I can't be what she wants me to be. Similar to Maz asking Han who the girl was, and then it cuts. There had to be some kind of information dispelled, because when Luke's location was discovered, anyone could have gone out to find him. Poe could have gone to look for him. Leia could have gone to look for him. She's his sister, but she sends Rey. And when Rey finally showed up at the Resistance base, Leia seemed really happy to see her and gave her a big hug. Why would she send a random scavenger who comes from nowhere? Of all the other people at the Rebel base, why did they send Rey to find Luke? Even Luke questions it. The Resistance sent you. Why you? In fact, in that scene in the cave when Rey sees her reflection and she looks at those silhouettes, I took a really close look at that silhouette that she sees. And I'm fairly certain by looking at that silhouette's haircut, it has a similar wavelength to Luke's hair. And I looked really closely and I said, that's Luke. It has to be Luke. Because she says, I want to see them. My parents. And that silhouette walks up and it's like, oh my god. That's gotta be Luke. She has to be connected to him in some way. Now I know what you're probably thinking. Joe, you are reading way too much into this. Just accept the truth. She's a nobody. Blah, 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 blah. Look, it's not the first time we've been lied to by filmmakers, okay? Secrets were kept back in the original trilogy, and Obi-Wan said from a certain point of view. And plus, when we finally get to see from Luke's side of the story with him and Ben in the tent, it shows you that, okay, you can't always trust what the people are saying in Star Wars, as Obi-Wan said, from a certain point of view. And even then, I couldn't help but wonder, watching those flashbacks, there's something you're not telling us. How does Rey fit into all this? She has this unique Force ability, and she says, it's always been there inside me, but now it's awake. I can imagine that she had to have had some kind of Jedi training at one point or another. And maybe you guys are right. Maybe I am just reading too much into it. Maybe she really is a nobody who comes from nowhere. And I get why people want that, because they want something different and original. But it's not always the right decision. Being original and different does not mean the movie is great. And just because something is familiar or predictable does not make it terrible either. Again, maybe you guys are right. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe she really is just a nobody. But I'm just going to leave it with this. If she really is a nobody, then what was the point of all that mystery set up in The Force Awakens about her backstory? It clearly implied that there was more to Rey than meets the eye. Either way, in Episode 9, we're going to find out the answer. I could be completely wrong, but I'm pretty sure that she is a descendant of Luke Skywalker. But anyway, let's talk about Finn and Rose. This is a storyline that a lot of people are not really happy about. Now, I really like John Boyega, and I think he's really great as Finn. That character has so much heart to him, especially in The Force Awakens. But then he links up with this character named Rose. I don't know the actress's name. He's trying to find Rey in order to get her back to safety with the Resistance. But they're being chased by the First Order fleet, and the only way they could stop them from tracking them through hyperspace is if they sneak on board with a code breaker, disable the tracking system, and they can get away scot-free. And after discussing it with Poe, they head off to this planet. I don't know the name of the planet, but there's a point where they go to this casino and this racetrack of sorts, like something like, I don't know, like the Aqueduct in New York or something. It doesn't take up a huge chunk of the movie. They cut back to it between Luke and Rey and Finn and Rose and so on. It doesn't take up like a 20-minute segment or something. But it didn't bother me as much on second viewing, but still, it didn't feel like Star Wars. It felt something like you'd see on planet Earth, but with a few more exotic creatures. In fact, the design of the casino and the suits and some of the creatures, people having certain types of facial hair, I felt like I was watching something from the Hunger Games, or maybe a little bit of Harry Potter stuff thrown in there. And every time we cut back to it, I'm like, who said we wanted to see this? Just show Luke training Rey with the Force or something. That's all I care about. Or Poe trying to convince the Resistance that they're going on a suicide mission. And then they try to show this animal rights thing with these animals involved in the horse racing. I'm not against animal rights issues being brought up in film as long as they can find a way to handle it tastefully. But the way it came off to me was a little bit forced. And in a way it kind of made sense because these people that are gambling on these races are actually providing money for the First Order and the Resistance. And they also show these young stable children that potentially have Force powers, especially this young boy whom Rose gives the Rebel Alliance symbol to, and he uses the Force at the end of the movie to grab the broom and start sweeping. And I didn't notice that at first until the second time I saw it, but I guess it's okay because you kind of have to show that there could be some hope out there. And I wonder, is Rian Johnson planning on something with that kid with his new proposed Star Wars trilogy? I don't know. We'll see. And the codebreaker that they find is played by Benicio del Toro. He plays someone who's very driven by money and he doesn't really have a good sense of loyalty. He's kind of like Mac in Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. He's like a triple agent or something. He helps them sneak aboard Supreme Leader Snoke's ship, but then he betrays them to the First Order for money. And then it leads to Captain Phasma coming in ready to carry out the execution. And then it also leads to a fight scene between Finn and Captain Phasma, which doesn't really last long, but it's pretty cool. And Captain Phasma does look like she means business. I would have liked to have seen her do a little more though, unfortunately, because what happens to her, she gets her ass whooped by Finn, smacked right in the face with an electrical charge, and you can see her eye through the broken eyepiece, and she looks at him and says, "You always were scum, rebel scum." And then she falls into the fire and she dies. Yeah, there's no way she could have survived that. Oh yeah, and BB-8 still gets plenty of moments to shine, such as trying to fix Poe's X-Wing during the opening battle sequence, or him controlling one of those AT-ST walkers. I mean, I love that little guy. Oh yeah, and also him firing out the coins at those guards. Oh my god, that was perfect. I also liked what they did with Poe Dameron. It's one of those things where you see that one character trying to prove to everybody that he knows what's best and everybody else is wrong. We've seen that a million times in other films and television shows. This one, he's feuding with Laura Dern's character, Vice Admiral Holdo, whatever her name is, and it seems like she's leading them on a suicide mission. And it gets to the point where Poe decides to form a mutiny and try to get the Resistance back in the right direction. But what turns out to be the case, there was a plan all along, and he almost ruined it. I really like Oscar Isaac as Poe Dameron, and I like that he was given more to do in this one. And in a way, he's kind of like Tom Cruise in Top Gun. He's a really big hotshot. He's always like, fight, 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 fight. But then after he's knocked unconscious by Princess Leia, and also after being demoted for not doing what he was told to do and getting almost everybody killed, and also seeing Luke Skywalker going out to confront Kylo Ren, he decides, okay, we don't always have to blow stuff up. Sometimes saving lives is actually much more important. It's a really unique arc, and I think Oscar Isaac did it perfectly. Speaking of which, let's talk about Leia. I've said before in previous videos, Princess Leia was never really my favorite Star Wars character, but I always appreciated that Carrie Fisher brought a lot of personality to her, and in light of her unfortunate passing, it was a little tough to see her on screen, but she still had some really great moments, especially in her reunion with Luke, which I'll talk about in a little bit. But there's a moment in here where Kylo Ren goes out into his TIE fighter and he starts to take down some of the Resistance ships. She's standing on the bridge and all of a sudden she can sense him. He can sense her. He puts his hand on the button, about ready to push the trigger, but then he stops, not being able to kill his mother. He's got a good side down there somewhere. And seeing that scene where it cuts back with him and Leia, I couldn't help but think of Adam Driver in this scene from This Is Where I Leave You.
Thou prepares a table
Mommy.
before me in the presence of...
I would like to talk about that movie one day on this channel. Oh boy, that's gonna be a fun one. Anyway, he He can't pull the trigger, he lets her live, but unfortunately another TIE fighter blows that bridge up, and she's jetted out into outer space. But somehow, she uses the Force to somehow fly back into the bridge. And on the one hand, it is kind of cool to see her finally use the Force, because it's been said in New Expanded Universe books, as far as I know, that she didn't want any training as a Jedi Knight, but she does have some Force capabilities, obviously being a descendant of the Skywalkers. It was cool to see her use that, but at the same time, I thought that was really, 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 really dumb. It's science fiction, and this may not be the same kind of outer space that we have in real life, but both times when I've seen this, I sat there going, no, 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 you lost me there. No, I'm not buying that. But in the end, it did allow us to see a moment with her and Luke, so in a way I can let it slide. But actually, before we get to that battle on Crate, let's talk about Yoda showing up. That was a huge surprise. After Luke fails to stop Rey from going to Kylo, he decides to burn that Jedi tree or the ancient texts. But then he questions for a moment, wait a minute, should I do this or not? And as he's walking towards the tree, the camera moves over to the left or to the right, and you see the silhouette of Yoda, and I thought, what? What? And then he stops and turns around and says, Master Yoda. I was stunned. And it's actually Puppet Yoda, with a little bit of CGI elements in there, because it has some blue highlights around his body, showing that he's a Force ghost. But it was so great seeing him back again. And he actually summons the Force to set the tree on fire by a bolt of lightning. Luke is just astonished by this, saying, no, the ancient texts. Read them, have you? Page turners, they were not. But one thing I really like about that scene is he teaches Luke a new lesson. Yes, you failed, but failure can also be a lesson. You know what you failed at, and you know not to do that again. And as I mentioned earlier with Rey being a descendant of Luke Skywalker, he says to Yoda, I can't be what she wants me to be. And Yoda says, heed my advice, did you not? Pass on what you have learned. Lost Ben Solo you have. Lose Rey we must not. Pretty sure I mentioned it earlier in this review. I don't know. My brain's kind of mush. But there's definitely parallels to Luke and Yoda. Chronologically speaking, in the prequels, Yoda is a very wise old Jedi. Has a very wizard type of quality. And after Revenge of the Sith, when Order 66 happens, Yoda goes into hiding. Luke, on the advice from Obi-Wan, goes to find Yoda. Yoda's very senile and curmudgeon-y and very weird, while still retaining his old Jedi ways about him. Luke goes through a similar thing here, trying to rebuild the Jedi Order. Then all this stuff with Kylo Ren happens, and now he's in a spot where, no more, I can't deal with this. Yes, it's definitely similar to Empire in that respect, but it's done in the service of the story, not for the sake of, hey, remember this? Oh yeah, and I have to mention, when Luke reunites with R2, that almost brought tears to my eyes. When Luke goes into the Falcon, and he's looking around, taking a trip down memory lane, and he sits down looking sad, and then the camera zooms back, and you see R2 right in the corner. He turns on, and he turns around, and Luke hears the sound and goes, R2? R2! Oh god, I love that stuff. It's, old friends. Oh god, look at me crying over a guy reuniting with a robot. But hey, those two are friends. Show some respect. And I really like how R2 shows Luke the old message of Leia saying, help me, Obi-Wan Kenobi, you're my only hope. And Luke says, that was a cheap move. Cheap? Yes. But a necessary one at that. Now let's talk about the battle on Crate. The Resistance manages to escape to the old Rebel base and get a message out to any allies that are listening in the Outer Rim. Not long after, Admiral Holdo goes into hyperspace and slices through Supreme Leader Snoke's ship, which I thought was awesome. But anyway, they go down to the planet and they prepare a defense or an escape plan due to the First Order coming down with the heavy Imperial AT-AT walkers, which I think actually look really cool with the new shin guards. And I think it has to do with the fact that after being tied around the legs, they use those shin guards as a way to break the cable, saying, yeah, we're not falling for that again. They manage to scramble up some old speeders and take charge against the First Order walkers. At this point, Kylo Ren is now the new Supreme Leader of the First Order, leading the walkers into battle. And it seems like all hope is lost, but then all of a sudden, the Millennium Falcon shows up, with Rey being seated in one of the gunning positions, Chewie flying the Falcon, with a couple of porgs hanging around the cockpit. Oh yeah, and by the way, porgs, I think they're fine. I didn't mind them in the slightest. Do they really need to be in there? Not really, but they're kind of cute. Especially when Chewie cooks one of them and is about to take a bite, and then all of a sudden he sees the other porgs going, and he shoos them away, get out of here, get out of here! And he sees one more, and he shoos him away, but then he's about to take another bite, and he goes, Great, now I've lost my appetite thanks to you guys. But as the Falcon comes in and starts taking out the fighters or drawing them away, I love how Kylo Ren says, "Knock that piece of junk out of the sky!" He just wants to get rid of all traces of Han Solo. Sorry, kid. Not gonna happen. And I love the line where either Poe or Finn says, "Man, they really do hate that ship." Oh, yeah. After all those times it outran the TIE fighters, yeah, they're gonna hate that ship. But then most of the speeders get destroyed and the rest start to fall back. And this big cannon's about ready to fire at this door that's hiding the remaining resistance fighters. Finn goes in to sacrifice himself, but Rose comes in and knocks him out of the way. And I actually thought that moment was pretty powerful, and in a way I thought, no, not Finn, no. But then Rose comes in and saves him, and she kind of gives him this speech saying, the only way we can win is by saving those that we care about. And then she kisses him. No. Just no, okay? I hate to say this, but I am not a fan of that character. I don't really see why she was in here. Nothing against the actress. I don't know her name, but I found her kind of annoying in this one. And when she kissed him, it looked pretty obvious that Finn's not really into it. It's like, oh, okay, you just kissed me? It's pretty clear that he's into Rey. In fact, when he wakes up inside that medical tube, he screams out, "Rey! Rey!" And when he runs into Poe in the hangar, the first thing he asks is, "Where's Rey?" And I hope they don't go in a love triangle route in episode 9, because... no. But after all that, hope seems like it's lost, and Leia seems really certain that this is the end. And all of a sudden, everyone looks up, and they see this figure coming through the hallway towards them. And it's Luke. And he reunites with Leia, apologizing to each other, saying, "I know that my son is gone. No one's ever really gone." Oh, man, that reunion between the two, that was touching. Seeing brother and sister reunite, oh, man. Woo! And even his small exchange with 3PO when he says, "Master Luke," and he winks at him. Again, another perfect moment. But one thing I noticed about Luke on the first viewing was how different he looks. He actually looks just like the way he does in those flashbacks he has with Ben Solo. And seeing that the first time I thought, oh, that's weird. Did he cut his hair? Did he use the Force to do personal hygiene? I don't know. But then he goes out onto the battlefield to confront Kylo Ren. Kylo orders all the walkers to fire on him. Fire! Fire! But then Hux says, "Enough! Do you think you got him?" But then Luke walks out of the dust and does this. And at first I thought, wait a minute. Unless you use some kind of a force shield, you should be dead by now. And Kylo goes out into the battlefield to confront him, pulls out his lightsaber, and Luke pulls out his and turns it on. Let me tell you, this confrontation, this is by far my favorite part of this whole movie. I was in awe when he turned on that lightsaber, and the dialogue between the two, oh my god, it's perfect. It's perfect. It's literally perfect. I love it. And as I've said with similarities, it's very similar to Obi-Wan's confrontation with Darth Vader after so long. You can feel the history between these two. Uncle and nephew, master and apprentice. It is so well realized in these scenes. And as it goes on, he ducks underneath Kylo Ren's lightsaber. And I think he hits it a couple times, but mostly he's just dodging him. And I thought, whoa. What's going on here? Even though I liked how he wasn't doing any big barrel rolls or flips in the air, kind of like Yoda does in Attack of the Clones, which was really hard to take seriously, but that's another story. Kylo goes in for the kill and slices through Luke, but then he turns around. Luke is still standing there, completely unharmed, and you're like, what the hell's going on? And then it cuts back to Luke on the island doing this. He's actually projecting his image in front of Kylo and to Leia, which actually made more sense looking back on it and also seeing it a second time, because I noticed when he's walking on the salt, he never leaves any red marks on the ground. My mom pointed it out to me, and other people have pointed it out before, so when I looked really closely, I thought, oh my god, you're right. But the first time I saw it, when it turned out that Luke was projecting his image, another force power that Jedi Knights have, I literally went, holy crap. That is awesome. And I know some people are not going to like this. They're going to call BS because they've never seen the Force used that way. And some people will argue that it kind of opens up these plot holes in previous Star Wars films. Well, how come so-and-so didn't use this in this movie when they could have used it then? Why should it be a bad thing to expand and explore on the Jedi mythology? There should always be new things to explore with this kind of stuff. There should be a different side to the Force that audiences haven't seen. We want to see different stuff done with the Force. And admittedly, it did catch me off guard where I went, Whoa. Okay. But after a while, I was actually okay with it. But some of my favorite lines with Luke is right before Kylo Ren goes in for the slice, Luke says to him, "No, Ben. If you strike me down, I'll always be with you. Just like your father." And Kylo Ren goes in for the kill, doesn't work. And then he realizes, wait a minute, what's going on? And he puts his lightsaber through Luke, realizing he's just a projection. And Luke says, "See you around, kid." Ho, ho, ho. Who's the bigger man now, Mr. Solo? Not you. And then it cuts back to Luke on the island, where he seems really worn out by what he has done. Climbs back onto the small ledge that he was sitting on, and he looks out onto the sunset. First time I saw it, I realized it was the twin sunset. And then the binary sunset theme plays, obviously being a callback to the binary sunset scene in A New Hope. And that's when I realized that he was gonna die. Surely enough, he disappears. He dies. And to be honest, I actually thought it was a very satisfying send-off for Luke. I don't doubt that he might come back in Episode 9 as a Force Ghost to maybe give some wisdom to Rey, or maybe taunt Kylo, as he said earlier, "See you around, kid." But I think this was a perfect way to end it, and I wonder, was what he did so nearly impossibly difficult that he literally lost all of his strength? Yeah, it probably did. But also, the fact that he projected his image actually cleared up initial confusion, like, wait a minute, why does he look so different? And I think it's clear that he showed himself that way, probably because that's the last time Kylo saw him and remembered him, and probably because he didn't want Leia to see him as all disheveled and old and everything. He probably wanted her to see him as the way he was the last time she saw him, in order to soften the blow a little bit. In the end, I absolutely loved what they did with Luke Skywalker. So satisfying. And turns out while he was confronting Kylo, he was buying the Resistance enough time to escape through the tunnels, and Rey showed up and lifted the rocks out of the way for her to be reunited with them to get him on the Falcon and escape. And it's also a great line when he says, "The war's just beginning, and I will not be the last Jedi." I really like how they ultimately decided the Jedi can go on, with obvious fixes to be made, from the old Jedi way into a new Jedi way. And I liked how they didn't decide to just get rid of it completely, as I'm sure probably some fans out there wanted to happen, because they wanted something absolutely ballsy and different. But like I said before, being different does not equate to quality. And as opposed to Empire, it actually holds on a pretty hopeful note, and not a very sour note as some second installments in a trilogy usually do. As I said, it ends with the young boy with the Rebel Alliance ring on his finger, using the Force to grab the broom, sweeping up the area, looking to the stars with a sense of hope in his eyes, and then the movie ends. And also, John Williams' score, perfect, once again. Nothing wrong with it at all. So, those are my thoughts on Star Wars The Last Jedi. I have to be honest, I do like Force Awakens a little bit more because I think it has a more fluidly paced narrative. This one definitely has a lot of great moments, but I do agree that the Finn and Rose storyline kind of weighs the film down, and it doesn't really need to be in there. At least either removed or shortened down a little bit by a few minutes. Other than that, I think The Last Jedi is a really good movie, and I cannot wait to see what Episode 9 has in store for us. So thank you guys for watching this review and my previous Star Wars reviews. Comment below and tell me what your thoughts are on The Last Jedi. Love it? Like it? Think it's alright? Or do you hate it? Either way, I'm prepared for it, and I will see you guys next time, and have a Merry Christmas, and may the Force be with you.